Hi guys, recently I made this beautiful beef vindaloo, and it mightn't be the prettiest thing in the world, but it was definitely one of the nicest things I've ever made. It was so delicious. I can't really handle heat too well either, but this is a completely authentic recipe, and the vindaloos in Goa, where the dish originates, are actually not as hot as your local curry shop might suggest. And even though it takes a lot of marinating and a long time cooking as well, it's actually very easy. Start off with a spice grinder just like this to grind whole spices to go into your marinade. You can use the shop bought pre-ground stuff if you like, but this is way stronger. That's a 5cm stick of cinnamon that I'm grinding up first. Once that's finely ground, I'm going to add in about 3 Kashmiri chilies to render about 2 teaspoons of Kashmiri chili powder, and it's best to grind the big spices first. Once they're finely ground too, you can go ahead and add the rest of your smaller spices, starting off with the black seeds from about 15 green cardamom pods, then 1 teaspoon of whole cloves, a teaspoon of cumin seeds, though that looks probably more like a teaspoon and a half, doesn't matter. All these quantities are just loose suggestions, so that's about a teaspoon of black peppercorns. Now go ahead and grind that up until it's all really fine, and looking a little bit like this. Now set it aside while you crack on with the rest of the marinade ingredients. Starting with your fresh garlic. I've got a lot of it here, about a bulb and a half of peeled garlic cloves and about a 5cm piece of fresh ginger. I'm just going to lightly chop before I put it into the food processor. Next, take 1 red onion and chop it up very roughly before you add that as well. Red onions are a lot more common in Indian cooking than white onions, so unless otherwise stated, you should always use red onions. Next is about half a teaspoon of turmeric. I'm using shop bought powder here because I tried to grind the dried turmeric myself and I almost broke my grinder, but this is the only shop bought pre-ground stuff that I use. Now add some white wine vinegar. The recipe calls for 5 tablespoons, but I just eyeball everything, so for me, that's going to be about 5 little splashes. Next, you'll need about 2 tablespoons of tamarind liquid. You may have seen me before rendering this from tamarind pulp, but this time I'm just using the concentrated stuff that I diluted with a little bit of boiling water. This tamarind has such a sharp, tangy flavour, and it's what gives brown sauce its distinct taste, because brown sauce is really heavily influenced by Indian flavours. Next, you're going to add some sea salt flakes. I added about a teaspoon and a half, and a good pinch of sugar, or maybe half a teaspoon. Now add in your finely ground spices from earlier. It really is so important to grind your own spices. These grinders are like £11 online and they make such a huge difference. The kitchen smelled like a souk at this point. Now just fire up your processor and blitz until it's all a nice even paste. Now take a large bowl and add 750 grams of diced shin beef. You can see there all the connective tissue is really good for slow cooking. That takes a long time to render down, but when it does, it'll baste the meat from within and it'll be so tender and delicious. Now just pour over that amazing paste you've just made. As far as I know, the acidic vinegar and tamarind liquid will help to tenderize the meat by breaking down the fibres as well. Give it all a good mix up so that the beef is all nicely coated, and then cover it with tin foil and stick it in the fridge for at least 12 hours, but I actually left it in there for 24 hours. Now, I should say you can head over to rookiecook.org for the full recipe and to leave me a comment. Now, on the day you're serving it, all you have to do is take 1 onion and just chop it up. Not too finely, but finely enough. And again, this is a red onion here. When it's done, add it to a bowl and set it aside. Next, take 3 ripe red tomatoes and just slice them up. And then set them aside in a separate bowl because you're going to be adding these at a separate time to the onions. And make sure you collect all that water that's running out of them. Now take 3 fresh green chilies and halve them down the middle and de-seed them. If you want this curry to be really hot, then you could just leave the seeds in or use more chilies, but anyone could really handle this curry. It's not really about heat, it's about all the other flavours that are really intense. Now add your chili halves to the bowl with your tomato slices because they'll all be going into the curry at the same time, and set aside. To make the curry, take a large heavy base saucepan or casserole and add 2 tablespoons of ghee, or I'm using unsalted butter because it's more or less the same thing. and melt it over a medium heat. Now add your chopped onion and give them a good stir and allow them to cook over the medium heat for about 10 minutes until they just start to go golden. 10 minutes later they should be looking at something a little bit like this. So turn the heat up to medium high and add all the beef and all the marinade from the bowl. Stir occasionally while you cook this beef for 5 minutes. 5 minutes later, go in with your tomatoes and chilli, plus 100 milliliters of water, and give it a good stir. Then bring the heat back down to medium and clamp the lid on and cook for 2 hours, stirring very occasionally, and add a little bit more water if you think it's starting to dry out or if it's starting to catch at the bottom. 2 hours later, what you're left with is a curry that is so intensely flavoursome and so delicious, and beef that is so tender that it's kind of eat with a spoon kind of tender. It's just insane. I served it up with my easy pilau rice, the video for which I'll put in the description below. And that's it. Thanks a million for watching, guys. I really hope you try this one because it's so good, and in spite of all the marinating and the 2 hours cooking as well, you saw that it's just so easy. I hope you liked the video. If you did, give me a like and subscribe and share to your friends on social media. You'll find all my social media in the description below, as well as the link to my blog where you'll find the full recipe at www.rookiecook.org.